Hi everyone, and welcome again to our fortnightly update on how the events industry is responding to COVID-19. I'm Lauren Demille-Meester from the business development team at Higher Space Professional and will be hosting you today. So again, you'll be able to find the link to our recently updated Safer Events white paper in the link below. Venues and events organizer will be able to find out how to get accredited through this white paper. So today I'm delighted to be joined again by Simon Hughes, who's chair of the BVEP, who have basically been in charge of negotiating with the government during the pandemic, and Carina Bauer, CEO of the IMEX group, who are obviously the leading global exhibition for meeting and events industry. So if you have any questions for the speakers, you can submit them in the comments below of the live stream, or using the hashtag #HSPresents, and we will be picking those up towards the end. So today, obviously, we'll be reviewing the latest government guidelines. I think best to get right into it and start off with what has the government recently announced, or what are they about to announce, and how will that affect the events industry?
Hi, Lauren, and hi, everybody. Firstly, an apology, trying to catch up on 6 weeks' work. The builders next door might well start drilling while I'm talking, but I've tried to persuade them not to, but they're not playing ball, I'm afraid. People who are playing ball, though, is the UK government. We're working extraordinarily hard, not just the BVEP, but lots of other leading trade associations and partners and stakeholders in trying to get the guidance out for the visitor economy, which includes events. That's where events are sitting. And we're hopeful that that guidance in terms of giving us instructions on how to run events, when we can reopen, when we can start trading again, we're hoping that that might be available sometime next week. I think the 13th was the date we were kind of working to. This is, of course, subject to final sign-off and approval by Number 10 and various other people. So we can't guarantee it, but that's what we're hoping for. So that's been a huge focus. We've been really lucky, Lauren, in having the support of people like the AEO and the MIA. And let's talk about what this guidance means. Different countries around the world have done it in different ways. Some have been quite prescriptive. So they're saying, okay, this is a government-approved standard operating procedure. You have to run things like this. So quite prescriptive and kind of mandatory. We're going down a much more different track. Top-line advice based on best practice in public health, things that businesses need to consider, which will be common across lots of businesses as we try and turn the economy back on. But then underneath that, in the guidance, really expert advice and options that are being prepared by some of the leading trade associations in the UK. This makes for a bit of a cumbersome document, I have to say. I think there's something like 30 links in it, taking you off to other places to go and look at the kind of more detail. But nonetheless, we're really hopeful that we can get that out, and that will give people a chance to start thinking about and planning for reactivating business. The other thing that, of course, has occupied us and came to effect at the beginning of this week is the quarantine for international travellers. We've been gathering feedback on the impact of that on UK events, and we've submitted that to the DCMS and to the Home Office as part of a real collaboration with the airlines, with hotel groups as well. It's going to cause real problems. And interestingly, in the examples we've been submitting of the economic impact, you can pick some big events, like big world congresses, and you're looking at £1 million plus of economic impact. But actually quite small conferences where you have maybe 150 people, if 10% of the speakers and the delegates are flying in from abroad and they're not going to attend, that conference doesn't happen. And, that just stops it dead because you haven't got some of the key people you need to make it work. And that could be, just £138,000 to the local economy, but that's still another economic loss. And replicate that around all of our cities and centres for events and conferences and meetings. And you see how damaging the quarantine issue is going to be. A lot of confusion. I mean, why are we doing this now? We should have done this, months ago, if we were actually going to go down that road. And the other thing we don't we don't know. We know when the guidance is coming out, hopefully next week, as I've said, but we don't know when we're going to reopen events. We really don't know when that is yet. And also, we've also made it quite clear, we need a bit of time. We need to know well in advance if we're going to be inviting people or marketing or bringing something in, whether it's a business to business or business to consumer. So that remains a challenge. But I'll stop now.
Yeah. Carina, do you have anything else to add to that?
Well, no, I mean, it's very interesting, of course, to hear direct from Simon about the negotiations. I think, there are some key issues and points from an event organiser's perspective. That issue of lead time is obviously absolutely critical, and the government really understanding the need for some certainty over when we can restart. So not just what the regulations will be, at least that gives us something to plan towards, but actually when we are likely to be able to restart, I think is very important. I think the point as well, as an organiser, IMEX, we run a very large international trade shows, not in the UK, but that idea of the importance of the international aspect and really adding the value to an event, I think that is often overlooked. And, I know from my own experience that people have said, could you not run IMEX nationally or regionally? But then it's not the same event. And so, for those of us and for those people in the UK who are running international events, the government and the wider sort of community really understand the value that international aspect brings. And that's not so easy to replicate hybrid or online. We've all, I think, been extraordinarily creative and active in taking our events online. But the longer we do that, the more you understand the limitations that has. And so on the one hand, that's good because it really shows the value of live events, both from an economic impact, but also from a legacy impact, to really driving the sectors and accelerating the economic development of the sectors that we serve. But on the other hand, it shows those limitations, and to think that for a very long time into the future, we will be able to simply run online events, I don't think is realistic. So it's been a good pivot. It's been a great enhancement. And I think it will, understanding how to better run online hybrid events would allow us to probably extend the reach of many of our events. It isn't, unfortunately, an alternative. And so I do think that's a really important message for general consumers and for the government to understand that this isn't an industry that can be easily replaced in the online world.
Yeah. Obviously, the EIB have called for another extension to the furlough scheme, which is obviously another topic of discussion when talking about getting back into events. Do we think that this is going to be likely?
Well, I think it's, whether it's likely or not, it's going to be necessary. I think particularly if we put it in the context of social distancing or physical distancing, we're going to need more help for a longer period of time than I suspect many of us thought at the very beginning. So, for example, we've, at the request of the DCMS, been submitting evidence from all of our partner organisations about what the impact of social distancing is having. And quite frankly, at 2 meters, if that stayed the rule, probably most of the businesses that we've heard from are saying that that would give them only 25 to 30% capacity in terms of venue space in particular. And that's just not enough. That would see a massive loss. At 1.5 meters, marginally better. But so if you go from kind of 25 maybe to 40, you go to 1 meter, you get to about 60%. So that begins to suggest that you might be able to break even around that point. But of course, in fact, in some venues, you need to be bigger than 1 meter in terms of distancing for fire regs and things. So you have those considerations as well. But if we don't get a change in that, we will need furlough for a much longer period of time in the events sector. And the festival guys are already saying, their year is done. There's nothing there. So they're in a winter now, which is going to stay with them for the rest of the calendar year. So we will need help. There's no doubt about it. What that will require is really concerted and focused effort in identifying exactly what we've just been thinking about, is the economic impact. What is it that we bring? What is it that we're going to lose? How much is that value? And how does that impact on all the attempts we're going to need to resurrect our economy? And that's the economic argument will have to be made very, very fully, consistently, and backed up by empirical evidence as well.
Yeah, and Carina, how do you see it?
So whether or not we're likely to manage that, I can't comment on. I think Simon's in a better position than me to comment on that. But yes, the need is clearly there. I think the other thing that it would be great to really get recognition of is the world-leading position that our industry, the business events industry, consumer events, trade show industry in the UK really has in the world at large. If we take trade show organisers for an example, all the largest and leading trade show organisers in the world are coming out of the UK and are based in the UK. So I think as a sector that's not really understood in the same way as maybe the government or consumers generally understand, say, the creative arts, that we're a leader there, or a leader in financial services. They don't understand actually that we're a leader in this sort of event industry and trade show industry and what that means. So, if something like the furlough scheme isn't extended, not only is there a direct economic impact, but we also lose our market leading position because so many businesses will go under. And I think that's also really important. It needs to be backed up by empirical evidence, as Simon said, but I think it's another really important competitive advantage that the UK has. And as we're looking towards the end of the year and possibly a very hard Brexit, I think, the UK wants to engage and maintain its competitive advantage in every single sector it has, and this is a really obvious one for us. So that's another argument perhaps that we can make, but we do need to get that out there. I can imagine that the Treasury is not keen, and they've said they're not keen to make exceptions for industries, but I hope that with the right arguments, the event industry and the hospitality industry can prove why we need an exception to be made. And you go back again to the lead times that we need in the events industry, and the fact that some events maybe can be planned in 2 months, but some take a year or longer to plan, and as you said, Simon, when you're inviting international guests, when you need to put together an entire industry's ecosystem and bring that together in one place at one time, that's not something that can be done in a couple of weeks. So all of us, IMEX included, we have large teams who are used to working year round on 1 or 2 events. And once you lose those, you lose that for the year. That's not so easy to replace. So I think, I hope that the government can understand why it would be valuable for them to make exceptions, even though I can understand that's not the route they want to go down. But if they don't, there's a very large downside for them not doing that.
Yeah. And to top it all off, the German government recently excluded exhibitions from its definition of mass gatherings, which is obviously going to be a big boost to the exhibitions industry in Germany, which will affect our place as market leader. So could we do something similar in the UK?
Well, it would be fantastic if we could. I'm not. At this point, I don't think I'm in a position to say, yes, that's going to be feasible. We have really made the argument consistently since the get-go that we are not in the business of mass gatherings. We are in the business of organised, professional, well-managed events of all different types, which already adhere to very high health and safety standards, already adhere to kind of very world-leading security regimes as well, and that we have nothing to do with the kind of the mass gatherings actually that we've seen over the last few days. In fact, so the UK government's managed to organise some mass gathering by allowing those quite passionate protests to take place, but that's not what we do. And definitions, a lot of people have picked up on this. If we could get it changed, and that was recognised, we would. I think one, and again, I might be wrong on this, but I think some of that is because the states in Germany have the right to kind of talk about their local, regional, or their state regulation. So although central government in Germany weren't particularly happy with that, the states were able to say, yes, we actually want to remove that and encourage trade shows and encourage large exhibitions. So that's the difference, I think, between a kind of central government control and a devolved or regional or state control. So I think that's part of the equation. I think the other thing, and this is so complicated, isn't it? It's not just a question of the furlough. It's not a question of having enough lead time. It's also the question of the confidence that everybody needs to have to actually come back to events. Now, we see good weather and everybody heads for the coast, and we see very crowded beaches. The question is, will people also want to do that when the pubs open, do that when the restaurants open, do that when we start offering them events, whether it's consumer events or business to business? What is their appetite going to be for the risk associated with that? That's building that confidence back in. We've mentioned it before on these sessions, is going to be really important. How confident, or what risk will you accept to get on the tube? I don't know when, I can't remember the last time I was on the tube, but it was a long time ago. I can remember the last time I was on a train going into London and coming back out, just before the lockdown was announced. I haven't been on a train since. So, how are we going to, as an industry, have to work on that confidence? But not just of ourselves as businesses, but also our clients, the guests we're inviting, the delegates we're trying to attract in, the visitors to exhibitions and trade shows. Big question, I think. And there is some good news on that. Visit Britain is developing an industry standard. We haven't quite come up with a name for it yet, whether it's a charter mark or a kite mark or whatever it is. But that industry standard is going to be self-policing. It's going to be at no cost. So organisers and venues can apply and arrange their own accreditation to the industry standard. And it will include business events and conferences. So this will be a standard that goes out across the whole tourism and hospitality sector, including live events and conferences, and will give people part of the kind of confidence thing. It's a stamp saying, we are COVID-19, ready to go in terms of our safety, in terms of your safety coming into these premises or joining in this event or coming to this conference. So I think that's the kind of thing that we need to see to build confidence. And I'm hoping that that's going to be supported by a fairly visible marketing campaign and comms campaign. And everybody in the industry, I'm sure, would be pleased to kind of use that to promote the fact that they've thought about the risks and then they are managing them as effectively as possible.
Yeah.
I do think, in terms of building confidence, that clarity from government, from authorities is extremely important. So, the fact that in Germany they have separated mass events from organised gatherings or from business events, I think is very important. That immediately gives some kind of clarity that from a government perspective, they understand the difference. There are safety protocols in place. Just this week in Frankfurt, one of the agencies organised a showcase event of how you could put together a business event with the social distancing rules that are in place, and still make it a very vibrant and an engaging event. And I think, you know, those are sort of the very deliberate steps that they're taking in a destination like Germany to build that confidence. And I think, you know, for all of us, having some kind of clarity of communication backed up by, you know, scientists agreeing with it, whether it's the social distancing or whether it's the recognition that if you do put in place certain safety measures, you can significantly decrease your risks. Of course, people still need to make personal decisions about their risk and how much risk they want to take. But if you can show that those safety considerations significantly reduce the risk from maybe catching something from 20% to 10%, 10% down to 1%, people are able to then make informed decisions. And I think that's what will help confidence. And we're a little bit off that at the moment because, you know, we're in a very different stage of this pandemic than a destination like Germany. But I would hope that as we come through and our cases are significantly declining already, and we set some dates for when the business events industry can open, or organised events I should say, that goes with it some backing for those safety standards and those accreditations. Because at the end of the day, again, as from an organiser's perspective, when you're organising an event, depending on the event that you're organising, you know, a part of it is attracting enough attendees, exhibitors, from a numbers perspective, to break even or to make a profit. But the other side of the coin is also attracting enough people to deliver value, say, to your exhibitors. So if you're a trade show organizer like myself, you know, your exhibitors are paying to have a return on that investment, and that return is about delivering high quality relevant clients to that show in sufficient numbers. And if you only have 30% of them, however high quality they are, it's not going to be worth that investment. And so that's a really important factor that we need to put all of those elements together, both confidence, distancing, and safety measures, to ensure that when those events open up, they can also open up with some kind of confidence that they can deliver the value and the purpose that they were set up to deliver.
Yeah. And obviously we touched on this before, and we understand that the government is actually considering relaxing the 2-meter distancing rule to 1 meter. So obviously the UK hospitality have really stressed the importance of this because the losses are going to decrease. How do you see it rolling out?
I think, you know, I think from my perspective, I would just say that, you know, I saw some interesting research around, again, your risk of catching any disease, really, you know, your risk of being infected by people's droplets as they're speaking, and the difference between 2 meters and 1 meter. You know, I think at 2 meters, it was sort of a 1% risk. At 2 meters, it went up to a 13% risk. So again, you need to make your own personal decisions around that. But I think a lot of people, if they understand that difference, would at least be able to make them. I personally think that as long as we have clarity around those risks, then it's fair to reduce the distances, because then you're giving people the opportunity to make an informed decision for their personal circumstances. And that's very important that we're transparent around that.
Yes, I'd agree with that. In fact, I heard an interesting discussion, I think it was on the radio this morning, where a scientist was saying, well, the people who are giving this 2-meter advice are the wrong kind of scientists. They're not the right kind of scientists. It's not about people who are expert in respiratory diseases. It's about people who understand the physics and airflow and kind of the environment, and also people who understand social behavior. Because, of course, the distancing, the physical distancing isn't just the only answer. There are other issues as well. There was a really good article I saw, which some people shared about Portugal, where the 2 things that they do, washing their hands frequently, sanitizing whenever they go in or out of any shop or restaurant or bar and wearing masks in public all the time. Going into restaurants with a mask on, but taking it off while you're eating, but putting it on when you move around the interior of the restaurant as a courtesy to the other diners. And just those two simple measures seem to be having a massive impact in terms of their ability to cope. Now, we've got dozens of different rules, regulations. We should do this, we shouldn't do that. And we forget that in terms of managing risk, the social distancing is just one element. How we stand with each other, the density, where we're facing, the layout, as we heard people experimenting in Germany in terms of how to do that effectively. All of those are things that we can bring into play to help manage risk and to help create the opportunity. And let's not forget, we talk about how world-class we are. We must use the skills of our industry to help us. We've got people who plan, the city footprint for major world events like the Olympics. They know how to organize a city in terms of its movement, in terms of telling people when to get on a train or get off a train. They know about the ingress, the egress. They're really good at, we're great at this stuff. Let's start using more of that in terms of developing ways that we can deliver these events that, people, if we get the confidence right, people will want to come back. We're social animals. It's in our DNA. I know I probably say that far too often, but it's true. So, let's use the skills of our industry to support our case for bringing this back in good time, in safe order, observing a variety of different, regimes in order to reduce risk and make people feel confident. Mustn't get so passionate. It's ridiculous.
No, and you're absolutely right. I think we've got a couple of questions from the audience, so let's head over to those. So the first question of the day is from Cara. As people start going to pubs and restaurants again, which is set to reopen on the 4th of July, will there be a step change in people's mentality around events? Will it give them the confidence to return?
I'd hope so. Yes, I think so. And actually, I've seen it locally around me, people I know who are going back into the office one day a week or a couple of days a week. My youngest son, for example, works for a charity, and although they know that they're going to reopen their offices, they're planning to wait for the announcement and then reopen them 3 weeks later, so that they can gradually phase in and regularly assess the risk of having more people in the buildings as each week goes by. There is an appetite, I think, and so as we normalize, we go back into a pub or our local pub, or we sit in their beer garden and have a drink, or we go to our favorite restaurant locally. That normalization will help confidence enormously, I think. The big challenge, and I still don't really think we've got this right, is the transportation bit. That's where I think people might be, might require a bit more help in terms of confidence. And again, there is talk about TfL engaging volunteers, rather as we did with the Olympics, to help people on their journeys, to direct them in the right place, to help manage flow, to help manage the number of people getting onto particular carriages and things. So that's a great thing. Let's do more of that. Let's if there's a weak link in the chain right now, it's not in our world. It's the transport side, I think, in that sense.
Just to say, I would agree. I think it's about normalization of behavior. I think, when you put people into lockdown, there's a massive psychological impact that maybe we didn't realize at the beginning. But when we've been very isolated from other people and therefore safe in our bubbles for such a long period of time, it's going to take a bit of time for people's behavior to go back to more kinds of normality. And so it will be about small steps. But I absolutely believe that once people take those small steps, see that it's okay, work out a way that is comfortable for them and their families, and work out, I guess, their degrees of risk and the type of risk that they're willing to take. We are used to working and living in a world where we take risks every day. If we wanted to take no risks, we wouldn't get in our cars in the morning, you wouldn't get into a train, you wouldn't walk across the road. So we're used to taking risks, but those risks are normalized for us. And so we need to learn how to live with this new risk until such time as, fingers crossed, we have a vaccine or medication. Because the only alternative is staying in your bubble in your home. And that, of course, is another great risk for all of us, which is our economic fallout. So there's a balance, and we're not quite there with that balance yet. And it's a hard one to manage. But all these things like shops opening, restaurant, beer gardens, slowly but surely, I think things will change. And I think when you do look at destinations in Asia, destinations like Germany, who have managed, who are in a very different phase of the curve, if you like, of the virus, and you see the behaviors of the people in those destinations, you see that actually very quickly people's behavior becomes normalized, if they feel that the risk is being managed appropriately.
Yeah. So the next question is from Jack, who asks, which parts of the events supply chain do you think are most under threat, especially if furlough is not extended?
Well, in fact, the BVEP is running a survey again in conjunction with the Event Industry Forum and the Production Services Association. I think that it's on the supply side, it's the kind of technical support that we might find are going to have most challenges. So, a lot of our business rests on the brilliance of our freelance talent, who are mainly self-employed. And I've done some major events where it's been like an old boys' school reunion when I've gone on site and seen, so many people I know from across the industry who all run their own whole things. They're all expert in what they do. They all work together collaboratively brilliantly and create great production units to deliver major events. They're the ones I'm most concerned about. And that's why we're looking so carefully at them in terms of the work that they're doing and the situation they're in now. And the drilling's back, sorry.
No worries. Carina, do you have anything to add?
No, I would absolutely agree. Freelancers, we know our industry is very heavily reliant on brilliant and expert freelancers, and anybody running small businesses, once that furlough scheme goes, it's going to be very, very tough, because you can't flick a switch and bring all of those jobs back. So, small business owners and freelancers for sure.
Actually, can I just add another thought to that, which is, in a way, and this is kind of the brutal reality of the economic impact. In a way, the government has admitted yesterday, with the fact they're not reopening all the schools as planned, all the primary and nursery schools as planned, that we're wanting. One of the reasons is the stock of those schools isn't fit for purpose. We haven't invested in new buildings. We haven't developed open spaces. We haven't done a lot of things that, if we had done, would have made it easier for those schools to reopen. And I think, in a way, this is going to test our industry as well. If we haven't diversified, if we haven't got a big portfolio of clients across lots of different sectors, if we haven't looked at keeping our skills up to date and moving into new areas such as digital content creation, whatever it is, we're going to be tested now, and we'll be tested hard. And that's the awful reality. The people who will survive are the people who have, looked at innovation, looked at different ways of doing things, kept their skills right up to date, kept close to clients across a lot of different industry sectors, so that they're not over-reliant on one particular area. So I think that's the other thing too. We need to kind of encourage people to think about how they can, skill up, how they can, improve their situation. Otherwise, we're going to lose people. They'll have to go off and they'll get jobs in other completely different industry sectors, which will be a huge loss for us.
You're absolutely correct. So who are the key people in government you are talking to, and which departments are most involved? This is a question asked by Amy and probably most directed to Simon.
Okay, Amy, the main department that looks after events per se is the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. So that's the team we engage with most. But actually, what we have found, and this was one of the problems, is that actually events don't just fit in there. We are also talking to the Business Environment and Industrial Strategy, BEIS. We also talk to the Department for International Trade, because they use events very successfully to generate trade opportunities for the UK. We also more recently have been talking to the Department for Transport, because so much of what they're doing impacts on our world. So those are probably the main ones. But again, getting representation of one department is an aim that we're looking for longer term, and was actually one of the things we were working on before all of this kind of hit us and turned our attention to more immediate concerns. So DCMS, and again, I've probably said this before, the officials there are working very, very hard, and have been great in terms of supporting us. And the agency, I ought to name check as well, that is a government agency, is Visit Britain. Visit Britain organised the Tourism Industry Emergency Response Group. That meets on a weekly basis, sends daily updates out, and is a great resource for a lot of people right across the tourism and hospitality sector. We're keeping it friendly and collegiate, and we're collaborating. But I do get a sense too that there is some frustration bubbling up. When I talk to colleagues in the hospitality sector about situations like hotels, why hotels are not yet able to start accommodating particular types of workers and things, there's a little bit of frustration out there. We need to be wary of that. But generally, the relationship between, if you like, the industry and government is positive, is frank. But there's some sharp conversations to be had as well, without doubt.
I'm sure. And Carina, who's your main go-to for source of information?
Yeah, so obviously we're not negotiating like Simon with the UK government, but as IMEX, we are very plugged into all the trade associations. So we work right across the international business events sector. So here in the UK, the AEO, who feeds into Simon and the BVEP, also UFI, which is an organisation for trade shows globally, and then in the US, CISO, which is the Society of Independent Show Organisers. And then separately to that, we have very strong partnerships with US Travel, and they have a coalition called Meetings Mean Business, and both US Travel and Meetings Mean Business have a very strong lobbying arm right into the White House, and they're working with the White House on a day-to-day basis, lobbying them. And also the head of US Travel, Roger Dow, sits on a White House committee which is looking at economic recovery to make sure that travel and tourism and meetings and events is plugged into that. So that's obviously, very US focused. And then really all the trade associations, certainly in the business events industry, again, have been very collegiate and working together. So organizations like UFI, ICA and AIPC have come out with a document really showing how trade shows and large congresses and events can go live safely. There's a massive coalition with about 1,500 businesses gathered under Go Live Together movement in the US. So we were part of that, but it's being led by Freeman and GES. And so it's good to see as well the competitors working together for one very clear goal. But there's a lot of work to do, as we've heard here from Simon. but I do feel that the industry has very much come together right across the board. So yeah, so as IMEX, we're kind of plugged into all of those initiatives, and we're on various working groups to try to play our part in that as well.
Okay, thank you. So final question is going to be my own. Obviously, every time at the end of this webinar, we always ask what is the thing you are most positive about at the moment, which I think is a great way to end the webinar. So if one of you could please lead with letting me know what is the thing you're most positive for at the moment.
Well, yeah, so I'll go first. I suppose the thing I would say is that we are working hard together. I think we are making inroads. Listening to Simon today has been great. Talking to the German Convention Bureau, as I did a couple of days ago, where they're sort of slightly further down the road, both with their government and also with the showcase events that they're starting to put on and plan now and also into the autumn. So I think that's what I would be most positive about, and seeing shoots come out of Asia. So really, I guess it's that understanding that as you get further along that curve, as the country as a whole starts to come through this pandemic, manage the risk, understand how to do that, we do see that events are starting slowly. And that's what I would be most positive about, that we do have a roadmap that we can follow, and that will come. There's work still to do, water to go under the bridge, but I can see sort of some light at the end of the tunnel of how we can start to put on events again and get our attendees, as we said, confident to actually come and attend.
Yes, I absolutely agree with Carina on all of those points. And the one thing that's really making my life wonderful at the moment is the support we're getting from our partners, particularly people like the MIA and the AEO and the Events Industry Forum, putting a lot of heft into coming up with guidance and helping support the overall guidance being prepared for the visitor economy. The other thing too is we're working with young officials who sometimes are working at pace, to use that horrible phrase, and so they send out kind of like late Friday afternoon requests saying we'd need some feedback like close of play Tuesday, could you sort that out please? And I've got to say our partners right across the piece have been absolutely fantastic at returning quite detailed thoughts, whether that's about social distancing, whether it's about the impact of the 14-day quarantine. They've been really good at that. And that's really, really heartening, because we need that proof, we need that evidence, and we need those numbers. And I know I'm going to keep asking them for it too, but I just want to say it's wonderful the response we get. And the industry really is, as Carina said earlier, really is pulling together. Competitors working with each other, people giving us good ideas, good thoughts. That's the great thing that's going on at the moment. It's really heartening.
Yep, that's very good to hear. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us today, to both our speakers and our audience. You can find a link below to our Safer Events white paper, which has been updated today with the latest guidelines. So we look forward to having you on our next live stream, which will be taking place in a fortnight's time, as always, on the 24th of June. We'll actually be hosting the third of our three-part virtual event series discussing business and events in a post-pandemic world next Wednesday on the 17th of June. So you can follow us on our social channels at HireSpace to find out more and register. And as always, if you have any questions for our panelists in the following week, please email us at covid19@hirespace.com or message us on any of our social media handles at HireSpace, and we'll get back to you on those. Thanks again, and hope you have a lovely afternoon ahead of you.